Where was I? So I was recruited by a startup that had no QA. Optimizely, it was a Bay Area startup. They had developers building QA, building testing, but they didn't have any QA. So when they approached me, they're saying, "Hey, we have testing. It's not working. Can you come in as a consultant?" Eventually, what I did there was I built the QA team there. So I went from 0 to about 7 engineers. I also led the TPM org and supported our engineering leadership organization. And eventually, when I left, I was the chief of staff there. So I was kind of managing a lot of the things and testing. Which brings me to today. I'm at what I mentioned Iterable. At Iterable, I am the director of engineering here. I was brought in once again. The developers had testing, didn't work, quality was bad. So I was tasked to build the quality team. I was tasked to build the engineering operations team. And now I'm running the application support engineering team, and I am still the chief of staff to my head of engineering. So why am I giving this talk? What was the reasoning behind this? Being in QA for about 18 years, a lot of, my friends that I started off with, coworkers, they're running their QA programs. And we have this Slack channel where we chat, check on each other, see how we're doing. And they came to me recently and, the economy is bad. And they're saying, "Hey, we're struggling because, my boss is asking me, what does QA do? Why do we have your team? Why do we have headcount? What's going on?" And I was like, "Well, what do you mean? What do you tell them? What are you telling your boss when he asks you what QA does?" And they tell me very similar things to this, right? "Hey, well, what do you mean? We all know what QA does. Here is the SDLC, and my QA team, we write test plans, right? When, we build test cases, when developers are coding, we're building our automation, we're running these automation, we're managing it, we support the releases, and then when defects come in, we kind of manage those." That's a very traditional QA model. And that is the problem, right? Because QA teams that I've run, this is what we do. But if this is what we're telling our boss, then this is the problem, right? Unfortunately, the deck is now stacked against us running QA programs, right? What I'm going to show you are some real examples of things that are being told to me, told to my boss, or told to my peers, which are other VPs, directors, etc. Why do you need QA to write test cases, right? This is a vendor that recently talked to my ML director and says, "Hey, man, my tool can write AI better than your engineers can. It can constantly run in the background, constantly, update your test cases based off what's going on." On the other side, why do you even need automation, right? Here's a tool, this white paper they wrote that said, "Hey, look, for this company, boom, we can run the automation for you, and you need less headcount. So why do you have a traditional QA team? Well, we can do this for you." Or even better, why do you need QA engineers? Look at us, we can scale 2 to 30. We can do everything your QA team does for third of the price because we're offshoring it, right? So suddenly, running QA teams or being on a QA team, the value proposition is getting worse and worse. And I know you guys all came from the last one, but I thought it was funny because it suddenly feels like you're in this one. Okay, well, there's no sound, so you can't really hear it. But this is from Office Space, and basically he's saying, "Well, what do you do here?" I really wish I had sound. Anyways, let's skip this. So how do we answer the value question, right? Because normally, if you're talking to your head of engineering, your stakeholders, you're saying things like, "Wait, my quality program does more than just testing," right? We're building solutions to ensure that our engineering organization is successful in delivering the value proposition to our customers, what they've paid for, right? These solutions are more than just technical solutions, right? They could be, culture shaping, they could be quality processes, governance, understanding how our customers need to be served and delivering those value propositions, right? We have KPIs, we're using these data points, we're shaping things that third party or AI can't do, right? The good news is I don't think anyone's not doing this. We've been doing this for a long time. There's a reason why QA hasn't died. The bad news, though, is traditionally no one's ever taught us, no one's ever said, "Hey, how are you going to show this value? How are you building this into your program?" Right? How are you thinking about this? How are you building this alongside of what you should be doing? Because when I was leading QA programs, this was never something that was taught to me. It was something that I had to learn. So how should we as leaders or as people in our QA programs ensure that the services are utilized and valued? And how do we make sure that our leadership team knows about this? Well, if you know how I like to do my talks, I like to give kind of parallelisms, right? Like an example. So the example I'm going to use today is the SaaS business model, right? The problems we're facing today is no different than problems faced by software as service companies with customers. Why is that? Think about it. How does a SaaS company work? It delivers a service or a product to its customers, and those customers like it, they'll pay for it. Next year, they get value, they'll pay for it again. And not just pay for it again, they may even pay more for more services, for more product. And that's how SaaS companies work. In the same sense, if they don't do a good job, they're not showing that value, what happens? You churn. We're done. I don't want them. A competitor comes in and says, I can do it for cheaper. Fine, I'll go to that competitor. That's no different than our quality programs, right? If we're doing a good job, they'll grow our teams. They'll give us more responsibilities. We're doing a bad job, we're not showing that value, they churn. We get laid off. We lose areas that we should be responsible for. And the good news is, if we look at this model, SaaS companies are killing it, right? Look at year after year, SaaS companies worldwide, that's a beautiful, beautiful graph going up. So today, let's take a look at value. Let's look at how this works. What are they doing? How can we copy some of these things? So let's talk about value proposition from SaaS companies. I know not all of you work at these companies, so let's kind of go back. How does it work, right? First off, SaaS companies find product fit. Why is the product that they're selling, or services they're selling, the best for for you, the buyer, versus their competitors? Once they get you, right, they have to do one thing really well. They have to deliver that value, right? They have to be able to make sure that everything you're using, you're getting that ROI, that you're happy with this. Then when you're using it, it has to work. They have to support you, right? Can you guys see, am I in your way? They may make sure that the services that you're using is uninterrupted, that if you have problems, they can solve it for you. And finally, it's not just enough that you get the value, that they support you. They need to make sure you know the value of using their product, right? How do they get you to realize that value? How do they get you to go, oh man, I love this tool, right? If you're using Cypress, oh, I love Cypress. Oh, if you're using some other tool, oh, I love, TestU. Like, how do they get you to say that? And what happens when they do this? They get you to renew. They get you to say, okay, I'm going to stay with you for another year. And then the things that you don't think about is how do they get upsell you, right? How do they get you to buy more? How do they get you to invest more? And that goes back to the beginning. How does my product fit this model to continuously circulate this cycle? Let's look at it from the QA standpoint. It's not much different, right? Why is our QA as a service the right fit for you? I'm building a QA program. I'm doing a QA program for this company. What are the services or programs that will fit my engineering team that cannot be done by a competitor? And once you have this, right, your job is to deliver that value to your customers, both internal and external. And when things go wrong, how do you make sure that you're supporting your engineers? How do you make sure the service is continuous? And when you do this, you got to make sure the value is shown, right? How do you actually show the ROI of having an in-house QA program makes sense, that's delivering this value to both your engineering org and to the customers themselves? And if you do this correctly, you'll get a renewal, right? They'll be like, hey, we love our QA program. We love our QA engineers. This is an essential part of our company. We cannot touch them. And then the strategy becomes, okay, well, how do we scale? How do we upsell QA? How do we grow the QA program? So today, I'm going to look at 4 orgs. I know SaaS companies have 1,000 orgs, but the 4 I'm going to look at to kind of map how I want to think about this are these 4. The first one is product management. This is the org that understands our customers' needs and how our solution helps them to be successful, right? And how do we scale this solution? The second one is customer service. How do we support our customers when they have issues? The third is account management. How do we help our customers understand the value of our products and service? And lastly, sales. How do we drive the renewal and upsell of our services? This talk is going to dive into each organization, right? What I really want to do is, for each org, there's one question, one problem that I'm seeing faced across all QA teams in this industry. So what is that current problem? And then we're going to talk about, well, this is not much different problem than what SaaS companies do. How do they solve it using their strategy? And in utilizing that, what are some examples I've seen work well and some things that I wish I'd done better and how we could have done it with their strategy. So that's the framework of how I'm going to dive into today. So let's get started. The first big problem I see today is, are we building the right quality program? What does this mean? Okay, well, I'll give an example. In 2014, Microsoft laid off his QA team, well, most of his QA team, right? What happened there? Um, Basically, they combined testers and developers into one role. So developers now test, and they got rid of their testers, right? But what I want to point out, and this is from Brian Harry, the corporate VP of Microsoft, is this quote here. We also set out to completely throw away our tens of thousands of tests that took 8 years to create and replace them with new tests that were done completely different. And what we're seeing here is the features that the QA team built were no longer being used. And that's why they were obsolete. That's why they were gone, right? If we want to run a successful quality program, we need to be sure that we aren't just building the right product, building the product right, but we are building the right product. And to do this, we need to ensure that we're building a pipeline of projects, right? Technical tooling, developer enablement, quality processes, governance systems, quality culture shaping, right? That justify the cost of having your team, right? So how do most SaaS companies do this, right? I like to look at product management because I feel like they have a really good process, right? So they start off with what I call market strategy, right? Identify the customer needs and what are the market trends. Utilizing this, they build product strategy. What do we need to achieve in terms of deliverables and how do we get there? And then does the product strategy align with our core goals? This allows them to do roadmap development. This is how they start to figure out what projects slate to where, right? Outline the direction they're going to take this organization. And then the prioritization. Does it make sense? And lastly, product lifecycle management, right? How do we handle the suite of tools that we have, right? Or services that we have, as they go through development, introduction, growth, maturity, and eventually decline. So let's jump into some examples. The first one is market research. This picture here, I don't know if everyone knows, is a picture from World War II. And what happened was a bunch of bombers came back and the US Navy was like, hey, let's figure out how we can make our bombers more successful. We have a bunch of planes that survived bullet holes. Let's put body armor, let's put armor on where the holes are. And statistician Abraham Wald said the opposite. Like, no, don't put plating armor on where the holes are, put plate armor where the holes aren't. Because the planes that survived show that that's where the most important, where they didn't get hit, right? And in this sense, this is very much like market research. It's like you have to understand your customers well, right? Do you understand your customers' needs? Can you explain how your testing strategy serves the customers and not meet an arbitrary KPI? Can you tie the outcome of your services or technical implementation to actual customer impact? One of the examples I love to give is at Iterable, our end-to-end testing coverage is very, very low. And every time I get a new manager that comes in and is like, hey, so what's our testing coverage? I tell him, he's like, that's not right. What is your QA team doing? And it's up to me to explain to them, hey, our customers care a lot more about stability and reliability than occasional UI defects, which is what the end-to-end testing does. So we focus a lot on making sure that during release, we have the right monitoring, the right recovery, reliability, run books that are built pre rather than a full test suite, because that's what our customers need rather than testing. In this sense, explaining to your stakeholders, right, what the customer really needs rather than what people think they need is super important. The second thing is, do you know who your customers are? Right? Are you recognizing the impact of your work on your internal customers, like fellow developers? Is your output adding value to them? I had a friend, he's a senior product manager, and he was interviewing product managers. So, I was cheekily asking, well, what is your favorite interview question? I want to know. And he said, well, my favorite interview question that gets most people is I ask, interviewers, tell me how you would design a elevator. And he said, the people who say things immediately about buttons or speed or design fail. It's the people who ask, well, wait, tell me which building is this elevator going in are the only ones that pass that question. Because that shows that they're thinking about, who my product is actually serving, right? the idea is that you shouldn't be building products or services unless you understand who you're building them. In the same sense, right? My last slide talked about Microsoft. One of the quotes I pulled from that blog, and if you read my paper, was this: full testing would take the better part of a day to run. The more hours to analyze the results, to identify false failures, and days or weeks to repair all the tests that were broken due to some legitimate change in the product. 2 years ago, we started on a path to redo testing completely. That tells me right off the bat that testing team did not understand what their internal customers needed. They built a product that was purely just automate, 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 rather than what do my engineers need to be successful, to deliver, to help the business win, right? Very similar to the last talk we heard in the, from Dijkstra, like, does that make sense, right? Do you understand what your customers need? Next one is building quality product strategy, right? Product strategy is, what do you want to achieve? How do you plan to get there? And does the work you do align with our business core goals, right? So every time your team, you yourself or your team wants to come up with an initiative or project, you should be asking yourself these questions. First one, the most important one, is what is the outcome? What do we expect to happen after we deliver this? And this is really important because when I first started this with my teams, they would tell me things like, oh yeah, we'll build a new test suite that will prevent bugs. That is not a good outcome. That doesn't tell me anything of how that'll help my business, right? If you say drive change-related incidents down by 50% quarter to quarter, where each sub-1 incident cost us about $100,000 in AR churn, that is an outcome. I can compare that to the business. What will help the business, right? The outcome actually matters. Second thing is deliverable. Okay, well, what is a tangible deliverable that I'm going to get if you do this, right? If you say something like, I'm going to write a new test suite, what does that mean, right? If you say 50 test cases, that's better. At least I know you're going to get 50 test cases, right? If you can tie that to the business outcome, it's even better. 50 test cases, which each one will cause 5 less incidents, which means more money saved or less engineering churn rate. Third thing, what is the impact to our customers if we accomplish this, right? Less churn, less credits spent, less engineering hours spent in remediation. Which ties me to this fourth one, which is how do we measure the effectiveness of what we claim for the impact, right? And this is important. I need real data. I cannot get napkin math, right? You should be able to tell me, if you go into Datadog, you will see a 20% improvement. If you go into Jira, you'll see a churn down. If you go into the incident management tool, you'll see X less incidents because we did this correctly at the end of the quarter. And lastly, effect. What happens if we don't do this, right? This is how we can figure out trade-offs. We can't do everything. So what is my ramifications if we don't do this work, right? I understand what happens if we do, but what happens if we don't? And this brings me to roadmap development. Sorry.
Which is great. All presentations from today will be on YouTube, and you'll have access to the full presentation.
Thank you. So now we talked about making sure we understand our customers. We talked about product strategy, right? Roadmap, this one's pretty straightforward. It's like, how do we build it? So instead of telling you more about roadmap, I'm going to give 3 callouts of things that I did poorly, right? I like this reverse examples, things that I failed. The first one is, when building milestones, what is the scope of the features we need per milestone? Do we bake in adoption and launch strategies per each milestone? Okay, what does this mean? When we have milestones, right, did I figure out adoption, right? So an example is, oh, I'm going to roll out a new test framework. Well, in order for that framework to be effective, who has to use it? Your developers, right? They should be testing with it. And if they aren't ready to adopt your framework and you built it, what did you just do? No one's using it, right? So you should have very clear understanding of every point that I'm going to release to my customers, my internal customers. Are they ready to use it? Do they know it's coming? Do they have all the docs ready, that they're committed to do it? The second one is feature prioritizations. What should we be prioritizing versus punting on, right? This goes back to my product strategy and outcomes, the effect. What happens if I don't do it, right? Oftentimes I work with engineers and I'm trying to cut scope. And they're like, no, you can't. That's the wrong way to do it. You can't be doing that. But if you don't prioritize, then you can't get everything done, then nothing gets done, right? So you have to be ruthless with this. Your product teams, I hope, are doing this in the background, right? And as engineers, I feel like we're bad. We just want to do everything. We want to build all the cool things. And you got to be very brutally honest, which ones have to get done versus which can we punt on. And this also brings me to the point, functionality versus time to market, right? This, I think we all know. We hear from engineers, okay, we got to get to market. We got to get to market. We got to beat the competitors, right? In the same sense, when should QE use proof of concept versus a fully baked feature? So one of the startups I joined, we had no API testing. And it's incredible. Like we would launch the new API, someone make a change in the back end to some JSON format, and boom, the whole thing wouldn't work. So we're like, hey, how hard is it to write a bunch of API tests? We only have like, X amount of endpoints. So I was like, how long would it take you to build this? He said 3 months. I said, 3 months? Why? Well, 1 month to do the scaffolding, 1 month to write all the coverage, and 1 month to tie it to CI/CD. So when developers hit launch, deploys, beautifully runs, gets us a dashboard. And I said, no. Look at the incidents, build me the first 15 that we for sure would cause us to prevent those incidents, make it manual. Run it every time developers deploy, hit that button, launch it, check that it works, and then go. And developers were like, man, I hate this. I hate this. I hate having to remember it. I forget to do it, yada, yada. But within 3 months, we actually prevented 4 incidents. We caught them, 503s, boom, stop, right? And what happened was leadership was like, this is valuable. This is something we should put onto our developer roadmap. We're going to put 2 more engineers onto this. We're going to build this out. And within 2 quarters, we had the whole shebang. We had all the test cases coverage. We had the beautiful dashboards that was tied into CI/CD. So when should you actually build a full functionality versus when should you do, get something quick, it's time to market? Lastly, product lifecycle management, right? We know how the SDLC works, but when we as QE engineers are building things, either culture, process, or technical tools, are we actually thinking about some of these parts? And what do I mean? Let me give you 3 more examples of things that I messed up on. When we launch, do we have an adoption strategy? I kind of talked about this, right? If we're building things and we're expecting developers to use it, do I have commitments from their managers that their engineers have time to adopt it? If they didn't, then what did you just build? No one's using it. Where's that value, right? Don't do that. 2, services and support. How do we support what we built? Are you taking time in your quarterly planning to take out time to support your tools, right? I joined a company once and they were like, yeah, we have Cypress, it works, but we hate it. No developer likes it. I was like, well, why? It's flaky. It doesn't work, false positives. And I was like, well, who's maintaining it? They're like, what? Maintaining it? We had 2 front-end engineers for 1 quarter from the front-end guild come out and build it. Now they're off of some other project. So who owns Cypress? Nobody does, right? So when you're building tools, you need to make sure that you're planning the maintenance, right? For us at Iterable, we build into our roadmap that someone has to be maintaining all the tools, the APIs, the end-to-end, the performance, right? We give it love, we plan for it, right? Part of designing these things from the beginning concept is how much maintenance does it need to be? What is the scope? And make sure that we have people who can do it. And the last part is retirement. When do we sunset features? And I think this was one of the things that I totally forgot when I was, when we were building things. We just built something and we're like, great, we built it, high five, our OKR's done, let's move on. But we never kind of planned when something should be deprecated, right? And if you don't deprecate things, like one example is, we're looking at Circle CI cost. And we're like, why is this one random legacy framework still running? What does it actually do? And everyone looked around and no one knew. We don't need it. It costs us money, right? It's not doing anything. It's not giving you value. You should be planning how to sunset your features if it's not doing things. Part of your planning, part of your design is when do I want to kill this? All right, let's talk about the next big problem. Do our engineers trust our work? And what do I mean by this? This is from a blog, and someone sent to me and it says, QA engineers use automation tools that bottleneck the release process and put quality at risk. Why do you need QA engineers? They're not helpful. They're causing problems, yada, 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 yada. It's fine. They're trying to sell you something. But this does, 18 years, I've heard, man, we were blocked. QB hasn't tested it yet. Oh, QB made a flaky test. Oh, like, why, right? And it's a real problem, right? Because, Celeste, trust is a really important thing, right? And SaaS companies know this, and they have, you know, almost as many support people as I've seen engineers. Like there's solutions folks, there's application folks, there's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Why are they staffing so many people that follow the sun? And it's because of this, right? This is from Gartner. SaaS companies realize, and I'm sorry if it's a little small, right? But 85% of executives believe that exceptional customer service gives companies a strong advantage on the market, right? 25% of customers are willing to pay more if you offer a quality customer support model. On the flip side, 67% of customers state negative experience with customer support is one of the main reasons for canceling subscriptions. 68% of customers leave when they get an impression that you don't care about them. Another research from Zendesk, HubSpot, and Salesforce found the same thing, right? 76% of customers' defection is due to multiple poor service experience. So SaaS companies are onto something. There's a reason why they have all of these support models to help their customers, because they know they give a good experience, renewals. If they give a bad experience, they're going to leave. So what are some things that I found work really, really good, that are really simple, that can give a great experience to developers? I break it into 3 different categories. The first one is what I call urgent help. This is important. What we do at Iterables, we staff an on-call QE rotation. So 1 QE engineer per week, we kind of cut 20% of their work off. And their job is to support the on-call channel. Any kind of block build, any incident, any emergencies, there's a way to reach them. And we track the turnaround time for quality issues. And we publish this. What we found is when we put in the QE on call, block builds dropped by 80%. Because they just tag QE, QE goes in there, looks at it, and says, oh, okay, we'll quarantine. Oh, this is a real bug. We've actually caught more incidents, known incidents, because we put in a dedicated QE support. So how do you handle urgent help? Second category is what I call planned help, right? This is when teams know that they need help and they can reach out, right? So we have a ticket system and dashboard for teams to request for services. Like the ML team doesn't have a dedicated QE team in our company. But if they need help, they can reach out through a dashboard, request someone. And what this does is allows me to track turnaround time per request and volume requests. So each year, when we go talk to head of engineering to talk about budget, I can show them, hey, look, these are teams are staffed, these are teams are unstaffed. This is the volume of help requests that we get. And this is, if you look at it scaling next year, what it will take to support these teams versus not, right? And this way, it takes away the ability to say, oh, QE doesn't help me. Well, no, we try to help you. We know exactly how we helped you. This is all the help we've given to you. But this is where we are in terms of resources. If you want to expand, let's talk. Lastly is what I call the ad hoc help, right? We do QA office hours where we have dedicated resources for technical issues or process issues. And this is really valuable. I find that each session is a little different, right? Sometimes it's pair programming on certain tests. Sometimes is discussions on best practices. Some of these has led to roadmap items where we've decided to build things because our customers have come to us and say, I need help. We really like to see this. And we actually were able to use that to build, what we want to do for Q4. All right, let's move on to I think this is the second last question. Is the quality engineering program perceived as essential? So this is a typical sales email I get. And I know my boss is getting these. I'm sure, some of you guys are getting these. Basically it's saying, boo, your team no good, our team better. Like we can give you, blah, blah, blah. Basically, essentially it's this meme here, right? It's like, hey, look, this is us. And these are all the vendors, and they're like, "Hey, we have AI test cases, chatbot more, you have 30%, blah 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 blah." Right? But this does shake you a little bit. Like, are we really like, the old person? Like, are we really not that great? And that's a real problem. But the good news is, this is no different today than anyone using your competitor's software, right? Or your software, right? You guys are all building things, unless you're government. You have competitors. And they're being hammered. You're being hammered today. Your company probably has salespeople who are hammering your competitors, doing the same thing, right? They're trying to convince them to change, to come to you, right? So how does SaaS companies fend them off, right? Well, SaaS companies have, tons of what we call account managers, right? These are the folks that check in with you to see how you're doing bi-weekly or once a quarter. These are the folks that tell you how great you are using your product and check out this report to show you how much engagement you have. These are the folks that do training for your teams. When you build a new tool, they're the ones that get back to you if you can't escalate something fast enough or give you new credits. If you're up high enough, these are the folks that take you out to eat, right? So why are they doing this? And it's because SaaS company knows that, increased customer loyalty and retention is a leading factor to get more renewals, right? Happy customers can be upsold. 65% of company revenue typically comes through repeat purchases. Revenue often comes from customer referrals. So doing really good account management with one customer can equate to more customers buying in. And the dev truth is earned growth is higher through better customer lifetime value, right? You make more money retaining customers than trying to acquire more customers because the cost of acquisition is higher. So what are some things that I've seen that we do as quasi account management? Well, the first thing I think we do really well is we do a monthly QA report, right? This shows the value KPIs that we're giving to you. Hey, engineering, what is QA doing today to make your life better? So we talk a lot about quality KPIs because we all know management loves KPIs, right? Number of escape bugs, change failure rate, number of incidents, build pipeline health. These are all used by our DevOps team, our QA team, talk to the board about this stuff. What we really do well is we highlight success stories. All right, we talk about things that Scrum teams are doing really well. Hey, this team has very low incidents or bugs. We do post-mortem analysis on any large failures and deep dive root cause analysis. This is the thing. You look at your directors, your head of engineering, they don't understand. They know something bad happened. They got to talk to the customer, but they don't know why, right? So this is an easy place for them to figure out what happened. Why did we have a failure? Now, I think the most important thing here is you always want to showcase your wins, right? Hey, my end-to-end testing framework caught 4 major defects which prevented incidents. Value, right? Also, discussion for losses, right? Direction for losses. Like, hey, maybe we messed up. But what are we going to do to make sure it never happens again? Right? Example, we had an incident due to a change in the reporting page. We discovered that our test coverage there was low. So we added more testing and monitoring to prevent reoccurrence. Right? So we're saying, hey, look, here are the areas that we're going to give you more service because we did bad, and we're going to improve on those. Second thing we do is at our company, we do demo days. I know this is pretty common in a lot of companies, but every demo day, I always make sure that our QE engineers do a demo, right? This is what I call value in action. I want to showcase the things that we're doing for our engineers. So we always talk about tangible outcomes of the project we did in relation to our engineers. Hey, because we did this, what value did you get? The impact, we want to explain to them the impact they will feel when this is complete and what the effect is if we didn't do this. Hey, if we didn't do this, you're probably going to get paged at 2 a.m. And then how do we measure success or effectiveness once this fully launches? And lastly, very important, it has to be technical. I want them to understand the technical portions underlying what we build. If it's a technical tool, if it's a process, it's fine. We want to talk about, hey, because we did this, there's 40% less something, right? What is that actual tangible improvement? Lastly, creating champions of the brand, super important, right? We want people to love us, right? So we identify engineers who are doing excellent quality work or who are power users of our service. We call these our quality champions, right? So for example, if someone uses our library to mock customer data in a test, we're going to reach out to them, make them a quality champion, right? We publish a blurb in their company newsletter on why this engineer was so impactful. We send an email to their boss saying, hey man, this guy's great. We love them. And we give them some swag. So we used to give out t-shirts. Sometimes we give out pins. Sometimes we give out hoodies, but we give them something cool, right? And what this really does is it incentivizes engineers to utilize our quality program and be in our ecosystem. This creates more growth, right? It brings in more interactions. The more QE engineers more engineers use our systems, buy into the QA program, the more value we are, right? We're creating brand champions of the QA program in our own company. All right, last problem. Great. Engineers love us. They're supported. We're building the right thing. Is your bosses or bosses investing in quality engineering? Do they care? Do they in their mind, are they thinking, I need to pay more, I need to build this, I need to make it better, right? And once again, SaaS companies know this too, right? This is from John Warlow. Like, Your biggest competitor for your subscription business is not the rival service, it's not your competitor. It is your customer's inertia in not using your service. So if we think about it in the sales perspective, how do we get our leadership to realize that they're using our services? How do we get them to see, the value, right? So I like to use, this sales deck. There's 7 elements of a great sales deck. There's some points, doesn't matter, but the idea here is, right? We know a problem. What is the QE solution? And because we give them a QE solution, their life's going to be better. We have to show that. Then how do we, deliver? And that's the sales proposition. So I'm going to give one example, and there's tons of ways to do this, but the one I like to give is what I call the quality service delivery review. I actually presented this last year, but what a quality service delivery review is a QBR. So once a quarter QBR, where we have managers like senior engineers, architects, the head of engineering, different leaders from support, go to market come in, and we do a delivery. We talk about the quality of the company. How do we measure that? We talk about, is it good or bad? How do we know? What are we doing to make it good or bad? And then what should we do next? Right? As a company, we get together and we kind of walk through these things. So in the service review, right, I'm not going to go through this, but basically, data, what we're going to do, discussion. But the data portion is really a sales pitch. Right? This is where we're pitching to our leadership the value of QA and what we're doing. So I'm going to give you some real examples. This is the actual slides one of my engineers wrote, right? So here he talks about Datadog synthetic monitoring. I actually blurbed out all the incidents because I'm embarrassed. We do have a lot of incidents. But basically he's saying, hey, look, we really didn't do good here. But hey, we have a solution for you. This is what we're going to pitch to you, synthetic monitoring. This is why. Oh my God, if you just had this, how much better your life would be. And guess what? We started to do it, right? And this is what you're going to get today because we did this for you. Now, what's next? Well, if you buy into this, we scale this, we're going to get all these values and we have a solution for you. We have a way to generate this value and we're going to deliver this next year. This is what it looks like. And what we're trying to get from them is, okay, well, great, I love this value. Can we buy more? What if I give you more engineers, right? What is the value I'm getting? And we really kind of sell this point that, hey, we're building things that are going to give you great value and why you should buy into us. Okay, am I running out of time? I see people outside. So what was the biggest takeaways? Let me try to finish up fast. How are you reframing your role, right? The role of quality programs must evolve outside of just, driving quality, right? We got to reframe ourselves, right? To the broader, what is the value that our services are actually delivering? And how do we do this, right? To help us figure out how to provide a value-driven service, we can mirror some of the operational strategies of SaaS companies to ensure that our leaders and our peers treat our quality program as an indispensable part of delivering business value. So one, right? Did we build the right product to deliver the right value to our customers? Okay. Are we making sure that's happening? Two, are we proactively ensuring our customers, both internal and external, are successful? Did we bake in that support into our roadmap, into the way we do things? Three, do we bake in the mechanisms to showcase our value day to day, right? Are we able to show that what you're putting into us, we're giving you more? Lastly, do we effectively communicate how our strategy and implementation of our quality has generated success and how the outcomes of what we deliver make our organization successful better than what you can get from a competitor? Right? Are we upselling? Why we should continue? Why your boss, why the head of engineering should continue investing in your quality program? In fact, not just invest, but scale them because you're getting so much impact and value. So that's my talk. Thank you so much. If you want to ask questions, my LinkedIn is right here, and you're always more than welcome to email me. So thank you very much. Are we out of time, or do we have time for questions?
We have time for questions.
Okay.
Feel free to interact directly with our speakers. Sorry about the overcapacity. Hopefully everybody can see and hear well.
Cool. Anyone have questions, or are you good? Yes.
I guess the quick question is, how did you assess that your customers didn't care so much about UI glitches as much as performance and stability?
Yeah. So if you look, So we did a deep dive into the incoming tickets, incoming defects, and we found is the number of tickets coming from support had nothing to do with like, oh, the button's off, right? They were always very heavily on, oh, the reliability is bad. I can't do sends. I can't, something's not coming up. It's slow. So we know that that's where we should target, right? Looking at the data, if it's like, oh, a lot of the complaints is UI is buggy or, oh, then we know. So that's kind of how we looked at data and made the decision there. Any other questions? Yes.
You said that you had QA on call.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, were they the ones that were creating like the hot fix? I don't really know how it all works, and rebuilding and putting fix on the production. Or why not have devs on call where they can actually fix the issue?
So we do have devs on call, but what I'm talking about is I'm a developer. I'm pushing code through the pipeline and it says, boom, I can't deploy. I'm like, oh man, why? I look at the test and it says test failed and I can't figure out why, right? Sometimes it helps a lot just to call the QE on call to come in there and they compare, look at it and say, okay, this is actually flaky, or no, the reason why it's this is because this thing's broken, right? Yeah.
You work in a kind of a fast growth organization. Is there aspects of your recommendations about QA organization that would be different for more mature organizations?
I mean, I think the thing, regardless if it's more mature or not, is that when I was in college, it was like, how do we build? How do we code? Right. When I was working, it was like, what are you supposed to deliver? But, and I've worked at like big healthcare companies that are, hundreds of QE and we had to sign things off in pen. But we never talk about the other things besides deliverables. We never talk about how do we show value? How do we make sure those customers, how do we make sure that our customers are met? How do we showcase why we're doing what we're doing and if it makes sense? Right. I think even at more mature companies, it's even more heads down. There's so many layers I'm supposed to do, and we don't ask those questions. Right. As smaller companies, I think we tend to ask more because we can. And my proposition here is if you're not doing that, you're in trouble. Right. You should be baking these things into how you delivering. Yeah.
Guys, they used to assess QA job, especially from automation side.
Sorry, what is the
Guys,
KPIs?
yeah, to assess automation progress.
I think what we look at KPI wise is more of the impact. So like change failure rate, escape bugs, the amount of PRs we ship versus the amount of incoming bugs. So when we look at the areas, like example, if our change failure rates really high or the escape defects really high, then we look at, well, let's do a post-mortem analysis of a why. And if it's like, okay, well, these could have been caught by testing because we tag each bug, like can we test it or not test it? Then that gives us indicator that we didn't have high enough coverage. So we'll go and patch those areas. So I don't think it's necessarily KPIs of how much testing I have, is the KPIs of the business impact, like how much are we leaking or how much damage is happening if we don't cover it.
Yeah, because sometimes the critical company do they need automation. What they do, especially most of the time, automation like separate team and not do too much cycle and for owners for business. It's a question what they do, how we can assess necessary return investment.
Well, I think I am very careful because if you let other developer managers, directors talk about it, they'll always target, why is your coverage so low? Why aren't you testing things? So what I like to do is I have the data. So every incoming defect, every incident, we collect data. Is this preventable by automation or not? And then showing that data to leadership is like, well, no, you could write all the automation in the world and we would not have prevented any of these things. So why are you asking my team to build more automation? It's going to slow down the pipeline. It's not going to be effective. Instead, let's look at why these incidents happen or these defects happen. And let's figure out what we could do to prevent this. Is it a process? Is it run books? Is it better like rolling out? How do we fix it there? Right. Having that data and be able to have that conversation is better than saying, okay, well, we have a bunch of bugs. We don't know why. What's our test coverage? Oh, not very good. Then you have a problem. Does that kind of answer your question? Okay.